Hi, I'm Brent Holtz. I've been a farm advisor with the University of California for over 3 decades. And during that time, I've seen many trees planted improperly, most often too deep. And I'm here today to demonstrate how to plant those trees properly and get them off to a good start in your orchard.
Nurseries typically start digging trees in early December. Bare root trees should be graded for size and ready for shipment and planting by the middle of December. When planting bare root dormant trees, keep their roots protected from the air as much as possible, for these small root hairs can dry out quickly. Planting in the fog provides ideal conditions, as sunny, cold, and windy weather can be detrimental to those fragile microscopic root hairs. Keep trees shaded and their roots cool, wet, and covered in sawdust until they're ready to be planted. Do not lay trees out in the sun by the side of the berm or hole while waiting for a planting crew to arrive. Distribute the trees when the planter arrives at the tree hole to plant. Holes for trees are often dug first so trees aren't exposed to the harsh environment during the process. The planting hole should be large enough to receive roots without bending or crowding to fit them into the hole. Cramming a root ball into a smaller hole is detrimental to trees and should be avoided. Do not heavily prune roots, for roots are storing carbohydrates and sugars needed to support new growth. Only prune off damaged or broken roots.
If you're lucky enough to get a large 3/4 inch bare root tree from your nursery with a massive, beautiful root system, dig a bigger hole for that root system. It's worth your investment to dig a bigger hole for that beautiful tree you just got. Don't cut off the root system to fit the hole. I've seen planters take a shovel and whack off beautiful roots just so they didn't have to dig a bigger hole.
Excessive pruning creates fresh wounds on roots that are now entry sites for the crown gall bacterium, Agrobacterium tumefaciens. Agrobacterium is a plant pathogenic bacteria that can cause tree roots to form galls or tumors after infection. You can help prevent possible crown gall infections by treating roots before planting with Galtrol A, a biological solution of Agrobacterium radiobacter that can reduce infections by the harmful crown gall bacterium. Directions for application say to mix the petri dish in water and spray the tree roots with a clean sprayer that has never been used for herbicides. However, planters often dump the roots in a solution of radiobacter and water. This should not be done over and over again, because trees could also be carrying fungal pathogens like Phytophthora.
One of the worst things that can happen to young bare root trees is that they're planted too deep. A tree planter often thinks they're burying a post, and their tendency is to plant the tree deep, which is exactly what you don't want to have happen. Trees are not a post. I've often observed many trees planted too deep and killed by Phytophthora infections, either in the root or crown. Often the graft union is well below the soil line.
When planting, trees should be placed high on small mounds and as shallow as possible. Planting depth after settling should be no deeper than in the nursery, and the graft union should always be well above the soil line.
Every year growers call me out to their orchard and I find beautiful young trees dying, often from Phytophthora infections. Phytophthora is a plant pathogenic soil-borne fungus. That means plant destroyer in Latin, and it is very well named.
It's good practice to orient the tree so the concave bends towards the prevailing wind. Typically, young trees are tied after planting to prevent blowover. The tissue between the graft union and the first root should not be in contact with the soil. This tissue was designed to grow above the soil line, in contact with air. The roots are designed to be in contact with moist soil and to protect the tree against fungal invaders. Only let tree roots make contact with the soil. When planting, try to layer the roots with the soil. Spread them out spatially around the tree hole radially outwards. Sprinkle the soil slowly around the roots. Again, tree holes should be deep enough so that the roots are spread out and not cramped. The nursery soil line should be above the recently planted soil line. Place the highest root a little above the soil line and then cover it with dirt. Add 2 to 5 gallons of water around the roots in order to remove air pockets and settle the soil. Even if planting into wet soil, Water is necessary to remove air pockets from the soil so root hairs don't dry out. Allow for 3 to 6 inches of settling in the planting hole.
Some growers will pull trees up if they settle too much. I would like to see the tree planted high and properly the first time. If you pull trees up after planting, you can pull out microscopic root hairs and damage the root system. I have never seen trees die from being planted too high, but I've seen many, many thousands of trees die from being planted too low and improperly.
Trees can be planted at the right height, but then a berm can be thrown up around the trees, covering the graft union with soil. Make your berms before planting, not after, to avoid covering the crown. Be careful when planting into heavy soils that drain poorly and have slow water percolation. By planting high on the berm, excess water will drain away from the tree, reducing the length of time the crown is exposed to excess surface moisture, which will hopefully reduce Phytophthora infections.
Berms are more common in the Sacramento and northern San Joaquin valleys, and as you go south through the San Joaquin Valley, their importance diminishes. Some orchards survive for years before a wet spring kills trees that had settled too deep. Plant the trees right the first time, high on a mound or a berm.
When planting with Mariana 2624 plum rootstock, plant your trees the same depth they were planted in the nursery, as this rootstock suckers easily when planted too high. Mariana 2624 is fairly resistant to Phytophthora and can also tolerate excess soil moisture better than other rootstocks. However, it's not compatible with nonpareil and is not used very often. Pruning at planting consists of heading trees back to 44 to 46 inches from the soil line. Make sure to leave space for primary scaffold development. There's usually no need to add nitrogen fertilizer when planting, except if you've recycled your previous orchard and have a lot of wood chips incorporated into the soil.
If you are planting after whole orchard recycling, God bless you. But your carbon to nitrogen ratio may be off a little, and I would recommend adding a little extra nitrogen even at planting time to get those trees off on a proper start.
Following whole orchard recycling, fertilize trees early with 15 granule fertilizer since you can control the placement of the product. When fertigating with a drip system in the first year, most of your nitrogen is being placed where the tree roots are too small to reach. If orchard recycling wasn't performed with the previous orchard, then wait until new shoots have pushed out a couple of inches in the spring before adding any nitrogen. Never add more than 1 actual ounce of nitrogen per tree at any one time in the first year. Without orchard recycling, that's about 3 ounces of total nitrogen per tree. With orchard recycling, it is now recommended 4 to 5 ounces of nitrogen per tree in that first year. If your bare root trees are coming out of cold storage, it's recommended to whitewash them with a mixture of half and half white latex water-based paint and water. After planting is finished and trees are watered in and pruned, put the nursery-provided carton on to help protect the young trees from sunburn and herbicide applications.
The white paint can help prevent sunburn, especially around the top of the carton where the light can reflect and damage the young trees. I like to keep the carton on the tree until their expanding bark rips them off, usually the second growing season, for that carton can help prevent herbicide damage and sunburn even in the second year. Good luck. I hope you found my tree planting demonstration worthwhile, and I hope future generations of farm advisors will see less trees dying their first year in their growers' fields from being planted too deep.
For more information on whole orchard recycling, nitrogen best management practices, and more, you can visit almonds.com.